I want to talk about Dream of Five and why it is my favorite ROM hack of all time. I wrote over 3,000 words trying to put together my thoughts and feelings on this ROM hack and why it is my favorite. So I hope you can bear with me as I read them to you over the next 20 or so minutes. So what is Dream of Five? It is a Fire Emblem 7 ROM hack by Astro Luna Soul. Originally released in 2011, with a final public release in 2012, Dream of Five is often overlooked today as a product of its time. As an incomplete ROM hack now over 10 years old, it's no wonder that the community has moved on to discussing and analyzing different projects. While complete projects that started in the era, such as Olympian Nights, Road to Ruin, and The Last Promise, all continue to top all-time favorite lists among ROM hack creators and players alike, as an incomplete hack, Dream of Five is largely forgotten. Even for myself, I played an old build when it was still in development back in 2011, and forgot about its existence until 2019 when browsing Serenus Forest. I think Dream of Five gets overlooked because of the community's preferences and how they've pivoted drastically from what they were during the time of its development. The game likes to throw surprises at the player. It assumes the player is using save states. Maps are excessively large, but also will feature multiple one-tile choke points. It relies on its unfairness to create most of its difficulty, and obscures key information and items from the player, leaving only those in the know to play on an even field. I find that Souls of the Forest, a Fire Emblem 8 ROM hack by Skryza, which is highly regarded today, is very much the anti-Dream of Five, in that it evokes a similar emotional response by doing almost everything in the exact opposite way, but that would be a good topic for another video. Regardless, with the hacking renaissance that's occurred with Fire Emblem 8, such as the advent of build files and FE Builder, the lack of many modern conveniences and tech in an old complete FE7 ROM hack is a turnoff to most people looking to play something for the Fire Emblem GBA. Being an unfinished hack with both old-school ROM hacking design sensibilities, as well as no public releases for close to a decade, would certainly deter many casual players from revisiting and keeping discussion going surrounding its design and character. As a result, Dream of Five has largely fallen out of the collective consciousness of the ROM hacking community and the broader Fire Emblem community as well. As Epic here, the creator of Fire Emblem ROM hack, Fire Emblem Alethea, once said, "I never hear about Dream of Five outside of Pandan bringing it up." However, I would argue that anyone interested in creating a ROM hack, Dream of Five is something that you should strongly consider. I'd go so far as to say it should be required reading for any ROM hack creator or fan game creator. I would also go so far to say that if Dream of Five was able to slap complete on its thread title, it would rival The Last Promise as one of the most important and well-known hacks of all time. In this video, I want to talk about why Dream of Five is my favorite Fire Emblem ROM hack, and why you should play it if you're making your own ROM hack, hack ROM, fan game, whatever you want to call it. Despite some of its dated design philosophies, it also provides insight into the future and has a few strikingly modern qualities. First, let's break down Dream of Five and what it is. It's a Fire Emblem 7 GBA ROM hack with over 20 chapters of gameplay. This includes 7 chapters plus 2 7-chapter route splits, each with their own guidance. In a 2016 beta development patch, which you can see on Snake Mom Melissa's YouTube channel, more chapters post-split were developed, but nothing close to a conclusive ending was ever made. Even as an incomplete hack, the game in its public state offers a full-length experience split over the 2 routes. The game stars Renaer, captain of a force of soldiers from Alchema, one of the continent's countries. She starts her journey doing what most Fire Emblem lords do, responding to attacks from bandits. In the background, Pharrell, a noble of Alchema, is mobilizing and seeking to take control of the country. Renaer, unwilling to join him in his efforts, is branded a traitor and seeks to escape. The route split is determined by which country Renaer and her crew decide to go to first. Route A is Musain, a northern land with mages, and Route B is Honduras, a land where everyone is a cool swordmaster. I swear, I think every boss is a swordmaster in this route. In each route, Renaer meets up with a lord from their respective countries, and is employed to support them in their effort to stamp out corruption and insurrection from within. The arcs each conclude at their respective Chapter 14, with order restored, and the respective lord thanking them and offering to continue alongside Renaer on her journey to whatever is next, presumably to take on Pharrell, who has been hassling Renaer in both routes on occasion. Plot-wise, the best way I can describe Dream of Five is that it feels like it's written as if you have understanding from elsewhere. The characters and narrator don't go out of their way to paint a full picture, leaving the player to piece things together. It constantly feels like I'm being dropped in mid-conversation and using context clues to figure out exactly what they're talking about. Some might say it's bad writing, but the character writing and dialogue is so strong, I don't get too hung up on the plot points not being super coherent. My general view on plot in Fire Emblem is that it serves as something for the player characters to react to. And in a game like Fire Emblem, it's hard to make a super epic plot that also fits in the narrative structure inherent to the medium. Fire Emblem is ultimately a game about its characters and how you, the player, guide them to overcome challenges that the plot presents. The storytelling and gameplay format featuring ensemble characters that can perish at any moment leads to certain types of plot lines not working so well. While I'd say Dream of Five's plot is borderline confusing, it never feels totally outlandish to the point where it takes me out of the game. Fire Emblem isn't a poor mechanism for the plot simply isn't explained all that well. I would argue that because of its incompleteness, it makes it a little bit harder to follow overall and takes most of the blame for my critique here. However, where the writing excels most is Fire Emblem's bread and butter, the characters. The strong character writing and dialogue help keep the player invested in what's happening. In a way, the player is along for the ride with the characters who almost seem to intentionally hold back information from them. When I'm reading the dialogue, I feel like I'm missing out on context from conversations I wasn't invited to. While the game's plot is hard to follow, the characters act in seemingly rational ways, making it easier to go along for the ride. If the characters are convinced and taking things seriously and their actions seem to make sense given at least my understanding of everything, then I really can't complain. In that sense, I think the best way to describe its plot ultimately is unoffensive, but not completely clear. Speaking of characters, Astra and team did an excellent job of making most of the characters feel distinct and multifaceted, with very few feeling like a trope. The dynamic between the crew we see on screen is really strong and stands out to me among all Fire Emblem games that I've played. First, you have the trio that we meet in the game's opener. Your Lord, Renaer, your Jagan, Gareth, and your third in command, Colbane, all of whom have distinct personalities and help each other in different ways. They each have complete support lines with each other, so we get to see each of them interact together and individually frequently throughout the game's 14-chapter run. As the story progresses, most of the screen time is eaten up by these three, as well as the stodgy tactician Varcade, who you meet in Chapter 2, and the route exclusive Sir Arcus Starshield and Seymour, aka Samore, who you meet both after the split. All have good scenes, and the 6 characters really do the bulk of the heavy lifting in advancing the game's plot. Each character is distinct and dynamic enough to carry the bulk of the dialogue, and each has enough time with each other that we get to see one-on-one conversations as well. Even in the scenes during the part of A Route where Renaer is captured and not on screen, the supporting cast is strong enough to carry the story and show us a new side of their dynamic without her. Most importantly for me though, despite having a female main character surrounded by male supporting cast, there's close to no romantic tension between her and the other characters. While it's clear the main cast do care about each other, it is never played off for romance or seen as being flirtatious. It's much more akin to the deep friendship you'd have with someone you truly care about, or the care a strong leader would have for their subordinates. In this sense, Dream of Five is incredibly refreshing in that romance is never a focal point in the story. Even in her supports, Renaer never gets flirty or romantic with her fellow male leads, when it would have been all too easy for Astra to have made the game's leading men all her potential suitors. Instead, we get to see Renaer show her vulnerability with Gareth, as she laments about the death of one of her former comrades, with Gareth providing her cold comfort and pushing her to move on. With Colbane, we see how she mentors him and encourages him to keep fighting to improve himself, highlighting how much she relies on him to keep the troop running, even when he has his own doubts. Even among the minor characters, there's really no romance to speak of. Crow and Canis both like to talk about floozies and women, so to speak, but it's never really played off as anything but for a laugh. While there are still many unwritten supports, this lack of romantic undertones is super refreshing for me, especially given the direction the series has taken in its new game since Dream of Five's last release. Awakening, Fates, and Three Houses, all which sell romance as a focal point, with the player's role as matchmaking often superseding their role as a tactician. Beyond the game's writing, the gameplay's visuals are outstanding. While the thread shows that there were 11 contributing artists, all the mugs are remarkably consistent. You can look at a mug and know immediately it's from Dream of Five. My understanding is that Astra would touch up all of the mugs to give them a consistent look and feel, and the effort was well worth it. The game is pretty to look at, and even the shopkeepers and generic NPCs use custom portraits. Every item has a custom icon, and there are also custom map palettes, battle frames, and menu colors. The game's visual identity and presentation are easily the most impressive thing about the hack, making playing it just to look at it a treat in itself. Even among completed hacks, Dream of Five's visual polish stands head and shoulders above them. I'd argue that Sacred Echoes is the only hack to come out of the community that rivals its consistency and qualities in graphic elements. While there are a fair selection of vanilla Fire Emblem music tracks, there's no shortage of MIDIs from other games that largely fit within the tone, again contributing to the uniqueness and distinct identity that the hack has. There's a lot of music from Fire Emblem 5 as well as Fire Emblem 12, which kind of give you a sense of the type of gameplay experience you're going to be into, which we'll talk a little bit more about in just a bit. However, I do want to comment that while The Last Promise has His World, Order of the Crimson Arm has Super Robot Wars music, Dream of Five has its own tunes that I think are hard to separate from the work. I can't really listen to the Final Fantasy Tactics prep music without thinking of this game, nor can I listen to Guile's theme without thinking of Near Victory. The visual and audio elements come together in this way, helping to set the tone, enhancing the overall presentation and memorability of the hack. Writing and art aside, the main area I want to delve into is the gameplay. The gameplay is the most controversial aspect of Dream of Five, and it isn't unwarranted. with a mix of ambush spawns, hard timers, brutal hurry-up reinforcements, snail-pace experience gains, stringent distributions of promo items, fog of war with reduced visibility, poison longbows, and occasionally harsh resource constraints, Dream of Five does a lot of things that draw ire from Fire Emblem fans of all stripes. Dream of Five certainly keeps you engaged, knowing the game could throw BS at you at any moment, and it's also far and away the most unfair hack I've ever played to completion. Dream of Five also boasts some massive maps. While the maps are certainly aesthetically appealing, the maps are huge and can take a long time to get through. Without in-game save points, they're entirely too big. With lots of gacha moments throughout, it can be tough to make through a single playthrough alive. Additionally, with fairly stringent trickle of units and needing full deploy through the first half or so of the patch, Iron Manning is never really an option unless you're in the final stretch. Even then, the game's conditioned you so much that you'd feel like a fool to reset. To the game's credit, it is intended to be played with save states, and this was a much more common sentiment at the time. I think it's only recently that the ROM hacking community started feeling that you need to create a more authentic GBA experience by discouraging save states. Ultimately, I find this mindset makes things considerably more fair than the old school ways, and in a way, you could argue that they use save states to deal with crap design approach is also similar to some of the more modern Fire Emblem games with Milla's Turnwheel as well as Three Houses' Divine Pulse. Additionally, despite the maps being large, many offer little reason to split up or have narrow choke points to funnel your units through. The B route opener features a lovely mountain pass that gets clogged up with a long stretch of single tiles. Many of the game's indoor maps, which I'd argue all round out the bottom of the game's maps, are linear and narrow, winding paths without much reason to wander or to split. While the outdoor maps, such as the chapter I'm showing here on screen, are generally more dynamic, the linearity still persists. There's little transparent information, and there are multiple areas where the greatest difficulty is fear of walking into a gotcha moment. This is seen in B Route's Chapter 8, where you can walk into an enemy trap that spawns multiple Killer Lance Wyverns near the boss. Multiple chapters, notably Chapter 5, also don't pan the camera to reinforcements as they load in, meaning you may miss that new enemies have loaded onto the map, even when they are not ambushes. Multiple maps along A route don't allow you to do preps before force deploying units, which can put them in precarious situations if you haven't been using them or unequipped their items, such as the chapter 3 houses would go to rip off A route's Chapter 9, as well as A route's Chapter 6X and 8X, although the latter would be remedied in the 2016 dev patch. So why do I like this game so much, if it is so terribly unfair to the player and does a lot of things that makes players groan? I sit here making videos and giving feedback, and almost everything I suggest and claim to enjoy is really antithetical to Dream of Five's gameplay tenets. It's in part because it manages to still be engaging despite its unfairness. I always find myself wanting to go back to Dream of Five as if I want to show the game what for and give it a piece of my mind. While it certainly isn't fair, it is challenging, and something about beating something unfair is satisfying to my brain. Between this chip on my shoulder and the pretty graphics, as well as the fun character writing to go with it, Dream of Five has this allure that runs counter to a lot of the things I generally consider, quote, good design when playing other hacks and talking about them. By doing what it does, Dream of Five does a tremendous job of evoking an emotional response from the player through its gameplay and storytelling. When I play Dream of Five, it helps me understand why certain things are fair, why certain things are unfair, and how these elements make the player feel. Put simply, it gives us a blueprint for what not to do. But it has so many interesting innovations and bright spots as well. while getting crit by an ambush spawn wyvern or funneling your entire army through a single choke point while dealing with poison longbows is the antithesis of what I'd call fun. Seeing the innovative ideas in action, beautiful aesthetics, and the memorable and dynamic characters make it an adventure I enjoy getting to go on. Despite some of these less than stellar elements that lead to frustration over joy, I'm drawn in by the innovations in Dream of Five's map design choices, as well as the concepts it attempts to execute. There's a map with a breakable wall that knocks down a tower, revealing a chest. There are multiple maps that prioritize story over gameplay, such as the aforementioned map that Three Houses would later rip off, where your units join from different corners of the map during its first few turns. Or the map where you must talk to a rebel leader with randomly assembled squad of minor characters in your lord. I admire Dream of Five's earnest attempts at achieving gameplay story integration, even if it comes at the expense of fairness. It reminds me a lot of Thracia in that way, and I think it provides a wealth of interesting ideas to build off of and implement in your own work. While I'd never recommend implementing these types of ideas as is from Dream of Five, the pioneering and innovation is noteworthy and engaging, like you are participating in something experimental, making it a more bespoke experience. Because the hack leaves such a strong impression, it really helped me strengthen my own feelings when I was designing my own ROM hack. Dream of Five is a seminar in showing you what works and doesn't work in Fire Emblem, and which elements you need to nail to make your experience memorable, fair, and fun. To me, great character writing can carry a convoluted plot. Pretty maps and graphics can make looking at them for over an hour seem bearable. Seeing all these unfair things this game pulled and feeling their effects made me much more empathetic, and helped sharpen how I communicate information to the player, as well as give me ideas for how I could improve on specific concepts that stood out to me as being innovative or unique. We can learn a lot from what Dream of Five did do well too. It was one of the first hacks to approach anti-turtle objectives as rigorously as it did, as many of its chapters had hard timers. It prioritized gameplay story integration and was unafraid to deviate from standard norms to make something that helped better enhance the story. It pushed the envelope on what could be done through the storytelling medium of Fire Emblem with its gameplay and map design, and that's something that isn't as appreciated because it's also quite frustrating in its implementation. Again, the game provides a wealth of ideas that we've seen other hackers and even intelligence systems take note of and attempt to enhance on their own. I'd argue it also highlights a lot of what not to do if you want to complete your hack. And it's not very often that you see hacks that focus so intently on its visual presentation early in development, or even attempt to make a route split. Having so many cooks in the kitchen could also lead to slower overall development pace or other issues, such as inconsistent vision between designers involved. I won't claim to be an expert on how the team functioned, but I would imagine that a large team of people all working on similar things will generally lead to some inconsistencies in how the same ideas get approached. In addition, having multiple people on your team, while it can lead to a faster development time, if one person decides to drop out and there's no one else there to support a specific area of the hack's development, it could slow things down considerably. Dream of Five, in my mind, helped pave the way for some of these changes by challenging conventions in both gameplay design, as well as how we approach developing hacks. It did this both in what it did and didn't do. While some might say it's lost potential because it was never finished, it's still a full-length experience over 2 runs, and is a terrific window into a lost time. It shows us both what the road forward in Fire Emblem fan games looked like design-wise, while also perfectly capturing the sentiments of the era it was conceived in, and for that, it really fascinates me. After all this, I'm still amazed at how much I can talk about this Fire Emblem GBA ROM hack from 2012. It has a mysterious aura surrounding it that I can't fully wrap my head around. Even having written down my thoughts, I still feel like I haven't articulated precisely why I think you should play it, so I'll instead say this. Play it yourself and draw your own conclusions. It left a lasting impression on me, and help make me better at what I do. I'd encourage you to play it not just to kick back and play Fire Emblem, but to play it and think critically about how it was built and analyze the game as a work of art, as well as how it was designed. I find that really adds the most replay value when you look at it critically. If you're interested in creating a ROM hack, I strongly encourage you to put yourself in the player's shoes and add Dream of Five to your list of hacks to play to help you learn the game. I'm sure it'll leave you feeling inspired, as it did for me. So that's everything that I wrote on Dream of Five. I apologize for stumbling over my words as I did this in one take. And I want to thank everyone for watching, and again, strongly recommend you give this hack a look. I think if you're building something, you really can learn a lot from it, and it'll help make you a better Fire Emblem ROM hack designer. Thanks again for watching, and be safe. Until next time.